Welcome aboard. Welcome to another tour. Today we find ourselves off the coast of California on what is known as Santa Catalina Island, or more commonly just shortened to Catalina Island. Our tour today takes us over San Diego, and I thought this would be an interesting airport to depart from. Today we will be talking about an event that happened on March 16th, 1991. On that day, 7 members of country music star Reba McEntire's band, along with her tour manager, were tragically killed in a plane crash near San Diego, California. We will be talking about the events of that day and finding the location on Otay Mountain where the crash occurred. Let's get the plane started and we will take a look at our flight plan for today. Our tours are intended to find locations that have interesting or historical stories and find them here in the flight simulator. We're not trying to recreate any aviation events or flights, it's about the locations and their stories. Today we're flying the Beechcraft King Air 350i, and inevitably someone's going to point out that that's not the aircraft that was involved in this event. It's simply the aircraft we are in today to find the site, and we will talk more about the actual plane involved shortly. The plane is started, the cockpit is set up. Let's take a look at our flight plan for today. We will leave the airport here on Catalina Island. The island is located about 29 miles or 47 kilometers southwest of Long Beach, California. The airport code here is KAVX, and it's a privately owned airport located in the middle of the island. The airport is open to the public and allows general aviation aircraft to land here. The airfield is known as the Airport in the Sky because it lies near the island's highest point at an elevation of 1,602 feet or 488 meters. Catalina Island was developed as a tourist site back in the 1920s. First, we will take a pass back over Catalina Island here, then we will head east towards the mainland. We will go to the coast, then fly south along the coastline to just north of the border between Mexico and the United States. We will then head east, passing by Brown Field, where the flight we're talking about today originated, and then over to Otay Mountain, which is east of the airfield. Let's start our taxi to the runway. If this is your first time with us, welcome. What we do is we find interesting places to talk about, and we find them here in Microsoft Flight Simulator. We are in the Beechcraft King Air 350i. It's the Beechcraft Super King Air. It's a twin turboprop aircraft produced by the Beechcraft Company since 2010. It can accommodate 2 crew and 9 to 11 passengers. The flight that crashed here in 1991 was to depart San Diego Brownfield Municipal Airport, airport code KSDM, and it was to arrive at Amarillo International Airport in Texas with the code KAMA for a refueling stop. The aircraft involved in the event we're talking about today is the British Aerospace 125. It is a twin-jet, mid-size business jet. It entered production as the Hawker Siddeley HS-125, which was the designation used until 1977. The 125 is a low-winged monoplane powered by 2 engines mounted on the rear fuselage. It features a slightly swept wing, and the variant had 2 Rolls-Royce Viper 522 engines. We are airborne. First, we will take a pass back over Catalina Island here, then we will head east towards the mainland. We will go to the coast, then fly south along the coastline to just north of the border between Mexico and the United States. Reba McEntire was born in McAlester, Oklahoma in 1955 and was raised on a ranch in Oklahoma. She was the third of 4 children born to Clark and Jacqueline McEntire. The McEntire siblings developed an interest in singing, which was encouraged by their mother. On car trips, Jacqueline McEntire taught her kids to sing in harmony with one another. Reba would then go on to start performing at school. By high school, the McEntire siblings had been performing frequently. Together they formed a trio, which they called the Singing McEntires. In 1971, the trio released a single about their famous grandfather called The Ballad of John McEntire. It was released as a single by a local label. The trio eventually included a backup band which performed at local functions. They also started doing paying gigs at bars and dance halls in nearby Oklahoma City. Reba recalled, "We were a bunch of kids who didn't get to bed until almost daylight after some of those shows." The band parted ways once Reba's brother graduated high school. In 1973, Reba graduated from Kiowa High School. Reba attended college at Southeastern Oklahoma State University, where she majored in elementary education with a minor in music. In 1974, Reba's father encouraged her to take a job singing the Star-Spangled Banner at the National Finals Rodeo in Oklahoma City. During one of her performances, Reba was heard by country artist Red Steagall, who was impressed by her singing. Later that week, Reba and her mother met up with Red at a party at a local hotel. At the event, Reba performed an a cappella version of Dolly Parton's Joshua. Jacqueline then asked Red if he was able to help her get all of her children a recording contract. After going back to Nashville, Red contacted her in early 1975 and said, "I can't take all three, but I can take Reba. She's got something a little different." In March of 1975, accompanied by her mother, Reba embarked on a trip to Nashville, Tennessee to record a demonstration tape that Red hoped to pass along to record labels. We will cross over the water here towards the coast of San Diego, and then we will be turning south along the coast. After recording a demo, Reba's tape was heard by Glenn Keener of Polygram Mercury Records, and Glenn was interested in signing her to a Nashville contract. Reba explained in an interview later that Keener brought her tape along with another female artist to Polygram's Chicago headquarters. The label informed him that he could only sign one female artist. He looked at the two tapes in his hand, and he handed them mine. In November 1975, Reba signed a country music recording contract with Polygram Mercury Records. She made her first recording for the label in January 1976. Her debut single was released in 1976 titled I Don't Want to Be a One-Night Stand. The song failed to become a major hit, only peaking at number 88 on the Billboard Hot Country Song Chart. Through the 1970s and early 1980s, she'd release a whole host of albums and singles with a few different styles of country music. Reba signed with MCA Records in 1984 and released her seventh studio album, Just a Little Love. Despite spawning a top 10 hit, Reba was still dissatisfied with the record's production. Reba spent the next several days listening to various songs from publishing companies. Eventually, she found a song titled Somebody Should Leave and another song titled How Blue. She released these as singles, and they reached the #1 spot on the Country Songs chart and later appeared on her 1984's My Kind of Country album. That album became her breakthrough recording, leading Reba to become 1984's Female Vocalist of the Year, according to the Country Music Association. More albums would follow, and by the end of the 1980s, she had reached the height of country music stardom. By 1981, she had already had 15 studio albums released that included 8 gold albums in a row. She had received a Grammy and countless Academy of Country Music Awards and Country Music Association Awards. Her 1990 album, Rumor Has It, was well on its way to its current platinum status. She had also launched her acting career with the 1990 film Tremors. By all accounts, Reba owned the title of country music's queen. In the late 1980s, Reba's touring schedule became increasingly busy. To avoid long bus trips, she and her band began traveling by private planes to the concerts. On March 15th, a performance that day in Michigan was to be followed by a private show for IBM executives in San Diego, California. Following day, the band was scheduled to perform in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Reba had chartered 2 jets that night for her band and her tour manager. After Reba and her then-husband Narvel Blackstock arrived at Lindbergh Field, the road manager Jim Hammond explained the dilemma to them. The band was likely to finish performing that night's performance sometime after 10 p.m., making it a real rush to have everyone and everything ready to go before Lindbergh Field's 11 p.m. noise curfew closed the airfield. It would be difficult, but doable. Jim suggested having the 2 planes move to a nearby private airport, Brown Field, which had no curfew, so the band could fly out at their convenience after the show. It was a seemingly typical night on the road. Reba would later be able to recall everything down to the smallest detail. She closed out the show at the Harbor Island Sheraton Inn with her usual a cappella rendition of Sweet Dreams. Her band was packing up while she was still on stage. Following the show, because Reba was suffering from bronchitis, Reba and Narvel decided to remain in California for the night. At approximately 1:45 a.m., the first plane to depart Brown Field was a Hawker Siddeley DH-125 with tail number N831LC, operated by Prestige Tours and was leased from Duncan Aircraft Sales. A second plane, carrying more of the band members, took off a few minutes later, unaware of the fate of the first plane. Pilots of the second plane didn't see anything, they just knew that they had lost radio contact with the first plane. The flights were scheduled to stop in Amarillo, Texas for a refueling stop and then on to Fort Wayne, Indiana. A Navy controller at a nearby base phoned the FAA in San Diego, alerting them to a flash that he saw on the mountain range. The wreckage was first spotted by a Border Patrol helicopter at 2:20 a.m. The FAA diverted the second plane, which was headed for that fuel stop in Amarillo, Texas, but instead they were sent on a heading towards Nashville, finally stopping for fuel in Memphis. And that is where the pilots told the passengers about the crash of the first plane. At 2:30 in the morning, Reba's pilot called her hotel room to speak to Narvel. Call from the pilot, Roger Woosley, woke them up. Who would be calling at this time of night, Reba recalled, wondering before learning it was Roger. He asked Narvel to come to his room, where he told him he had watched the band get on the planes, and then he looked in his rearview mirror and saw a huge ball of fire. Reba described this in an interview after the crash. When Narvel came back to the hotel room where I was, it was 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and he said one of the planes had crashed, and I said, "Are they okay?" He said, "I don't think so." I said, "But you're not sure?" He said, "I don't think so." Though they initially hoped for survivors, the grisly crash scene painted a stark reality. Narvel notified the families of the crash victims immediately. He didn't want the families to hear it over the news. Reba would soon come to find out that she lost 7 members of her band and her tour manager. The 2 pilots of the plane were also killed. On that plane that night were Chris Austin, the guitar and fiddle player, Kirk Capello, who was the musical director and keyboardist, Joey Sigonero, keyboardist, Paula Evans, a vocalist, Jim Hammond, who was the tour manager, Terry Jackson, the bassist, Tony Saputo, the drummer, and Michael Thomas, a guitarist, the pilot Donald Holmes, and the co-pilot Chris Hollinger. The conditions at the airport that night were nighttime with scattered clouds at 3,800 feet and visibility of 20 miles. Runway number 8 was asphalt, and it was at the elevation of 524 feet, and it was dry and had the length of 799 feet long. We are passing over the Naval Air Station, North Island. This is where one of the Navy controllers notified the FAA that he had seen an explosion on the mountain. After reaching an altitude of 3,400 feet, 1,040 meters above sea level, the aircraft crashed into the side of Otay Mountain, located about 10 miles, 16 kilometers east of the airport. The National Transportation Safety Board, NTSB, determined the probable cause of the accident was related to improper pilot planning. As we make our way inland heading east here, we will pass by where Brown Field is. The border between the United States and Mexico is to our right. We are looking for the Otay Mountain, which is straight ahead. An investigation of the crash showed that the plane clipped a wing after a deadly miscommunication between the pilot and a flight service specialist. Had the aircraft been about 200 feet higher, or slightly to the right or the left of the peak, it would have cleared the mountain. Instead, plane clipped the mountain and began to cartwheel before exploding on impact. An investigator with the San Diego County Medical Examiner said the extensive trauma to the victims was so severe that none of the 10 bodies could immediately be identified. The Federal Aviation Administration, FAA, who investigated the crash along with the NTSB, said the aircraft was being flown visually. While waiting for his passengers to arrive, the pilot, who was unfamiliar with the local procedures and terrain, had 3 separate conversations with the local flight service station, FSS. During these conversations, the FSS specialist suggested it would save time if the flight departed under these visual flight rules, VFR, and then picked up its instrument flight rules, IFR, clearance once it was airborne. Pilot indicated his reluctance to climb through 3,000 feet without an IFR clearance, as that would involve flight into the San Diego Terminal Control Area, TCA, whose floor was 3,000 feet. The pilot then stated, "So I would be better off if I head northeast and stayed down below 3,000? The FSS specialist replied, "That would be fine." This was a fatal miscommunication. The pilot had been referencing 3,000 feet MSL, or mean sea level, which is the elevation above sea level, while the FSS specialist understood the pilot's altitude reference as 3,000 feet AGL, or above ground level. The flight took off normally and leveled off at approximately 3,300 feet MSL. The pilot had filed an IFR flight plan, but due to the delay in takeoff, this flight plan had expired. Without IFR clearance, the flight could not climb into the San Diego traffic control airspace without violating the flight rules. Responding to the pilot's request for IFR clearance, the San Diego controller indicated that N831LC's flight plan had been clocked out, but that he would put it right back in. Shortly afterward, The aircraft impacted Otay Mountain's peak at 3,550 feet above sea level. The U.S. Border Patrol also confirmed the crash at 2:14 a.m. Wreckage indicated that the wing of the jet creased the side of the mountain, causing the plane to break apart, dump its fuel, cartwheel in a northerly direction. Learning exactly what happened was difficult because the plane had no flight data recorder that wasn't required at the time. At the scene, debris from the aircraft lay on the roadways that ring around the mountaintop. One engine was completely destroyed, while other items like books, hairspray, and shaving cream cans and clothing were in perfect condition, littering the area. Reba and Narvel flew to Nashville the next day. Reba's final song on that night was Sweet Dreams. It's a song that was recorded in 1963 by Patsy Cline. Patsy had also perished in a plane crash in March of 1963. After the 1991 tragic loss of her friends and bandmates in this plane crash, she vowed to never sing that song again. Friends including Vince Gill and Dolly Parton offered Reba their own bands to help complete her tour, but she chose not to. Following the accident, Reba released her next album, For My Broken Heart, on October 1st, 1991. The project is dedicated to those killed in the crash, and its final track, If I Only Had Known, alludes to the loss. When Reba won the ACM Award for Female Vocalist of the Year in 1991, she dedicated the award to her band members.
This is for my 8 buddies.
That is a bit of the tragic story how 8 members of Reba McEntire's band, who were also her good friends, tragically lost their lives. Now we will make our way back to Brownfield, where they departed that night. Price of today's tour is really reasonable if you could just reach down and hit that subscribe button. It helps the channel, and it lets me know you want to see more tours. We will be on the ground shortly, and we will take a look around the airport. Based on the reports and the investigation, it appears the discrepancy between altitude above sea level and the altitude above ground level were what led to the crash. The pilot, who had intended to make this flight through IFR, instrument flight rules, would have expected to receive heading and altitude direction from flight controllers. Because that IFR flight plan had expired, and at the suggestion of the controllers to take off and depart and then receive IFR clearance en route, the pilot, flying visually, would have had to been familiar with the area or had VFR maps to know the terrain, which apparently he didn't.
One plane took off, clear as a breeze, and the other one hit the side of the mountain. I said, Daddy, just a second. I said, I got there, I'm okay. I said, but one of our planes crashed tonight, and it's going to be on the news in the morning, and we lost some of our band and crew. Probably the most guilty thing I felt about is having to tell my daddy I'm okay when Narvel's in there telling those other mamas and daddies that their kids are not okay.
We are on the ground. Welcome to Brown Airfield. As always, everything we talked about today was just my own research for today's flight. If you have any corrections or comments, please leave them in a comment below. Let's find a place to park the plane and get it shut down.
Bye.